And so one way to see how return can be, we can look at return in order to discover strategies that are going to be value generating, is to take a deeper look at the formula, right? So here's the formula for return on invested capital. It is NOPLAT divided by invested capital. And all I've done here in the first stage is separate NOPLAT into operating profit times 1 minus the tax rate. Okay, so remember from the last lecture that NOPLAT is net operating profit less adjusted taxes. So all I've done is separate that. So instead of writing NOPLAT, I wrote it out. I wrote operating profit times 1 minus the tax rate. Operating profit less adjusted taxes. That's NOPLAT. Divided by invested capital, which is the amount of money that we need to invest in all the assets of the firm, the operating assets of the firm. Okay, so that's our formula for return on invested capital. And if I just show you this, and you're the management team, and you say, listen, we want to increase return because we want to increase value, and I say, great, that's a fundamental thing that the key value driver formula posits, that if we increase return, we increase value. How do we use this formula to guide our decision making? Well, it's kind of hard with just this formulation, right? Just this top one. Because right now what we have is a very abstract rule, right? You say increase return increases decision making. And I say, okay, how do I increase ROIC based on this formula? Well, I can increase operating profit, or I can decrease invested capital. But again, they're abstract. Those are nebulous goals. Increase operating profit how? What does that actually mean to say increase operating profit? Am I affecting costs? Am I affecting revenues? Am I doing something weird in the middle? Right? There's a few things. I could change depreciation. I could look at my amortization schedules. All kinds of those things might affect operating profit, and there's no guidance here. This is still an abstract formula. Likewise with invested capital, we're still not quite sure how to apply that. Right? Now the tax rate is pretty clear. If we decrease the tax rate, we increase return. So that's a strategy. It might not be a viable one, right? And certainly if we have to resort to any sort of gray area quasi-legal tax strategies, it's definitely not a viable one. And we'll talk about taxes later in the class, so we'll get there. But that one is clear at least. So we would like the rest of the formula to be as cut and dry as that. And actually it's pretty straightforward to do. We are just going to convert this formula into per unit terms. So I'm going to divide the formula by units so that I have operating profit per unit and invested capital per unit, whatever the unit is, whatever the company is selling. And then I'm going to separate operating profit into its components, which is essentially price minus cost, right? Operating profit is revenue minus cost minus depreciation, gives me operating profit, EBITDA, right? And if I use EBITDA as operating profit, then that's even before depreciation. It's just essentially revenues minus cost. And now I have a much more specific set of plans laid out, right? If I want to increase return, I can do one of three things. I can charge more. I can increase the price per unit, right? Or I can do what's called charge a price premium. Right? Or I can decrease the cost per unit. So I can sell it at the same price, but I can produce it for cheaper. Or I can use the invested capital I have to produce more units with the same amount of capital. Right? So I can use my invested capital more efficiently. Right? So now I have three distinct strategies whereby I can try to affect one of these different inputs in order to increase return and hopefully generate an increase in value. Okay? So here are our three strategies, right? We can either charge a price premium, we can implement a better or more efficient cost structure, or we can implement a more efficient use of our capital assets. Right? Now, these last two, the cost structure and the capital efficiency, they're kind of hard to disentangle, right? Because, for instance, saying that I want to produce something cheaper may actually mean that I want to have machinery or inputs that are cheaper to operate and cheaper to run. And so then both of these things are tied together. Making more efficient use of my capital is also going to make my product cheaper, right? So a way to sort of think about it is implementing a better cost structure might mean finding a cheaper input, right? if I'm making something with steel, I find a steel mill that produces steel at a slightly better price. That's a better cost structure. I still sell it at the same price, I just have slightly lower input costs. Making a more efficient use of capital is having some genius engineer look at the machine and say, oh, you know what? If we just do this slightly differently, we'll be able to make 10 more units an hour, and we won't have to change anything else about the process. So that instead of making 100 units an hour, now we're making 110 units an hour. We are making more efficient use of the capital. We didn't change our cost structure necessarily. All the inputs are the same. But we have made a more efficient use of our capital to produce more, and that's going to generate a higher return. Okay, so there is going to be some nuance here that we're trying to tease out all of these different strategies. And so we'll just give a brief example sort of here of each different one, right? When we talk about price premium, one of the things that you might think about is, in other words, a price premium can't just mean I charge more. It can't just raise prices, because you have to think back to basic economics. If all I do is raise prices, then all I'm going to do is lose customers, right? If I sell the exact same product as my competitor, but I charge $10 and they charge $5, why is anybody going to buy my product? Right? So a price premium is not as simply just saying, okay, we raised prices and we charged a price premium and now we're making more money, right? Because no intelligent consumer is going to buy the same product for more as long as the other one is readily available. So price premium strategies are going to focus on ways that we can charge more money for the product, and that customers will happily accept that additional money because they perceive that there is additional value. And so maybe the easiest one for people to think about when we talk about strategies like that is quality. Right? If you are selling a higher quality product, a product that is just inherently better than your competitors, then people expect to be willing to pay more for that. Right? If I'm selling computers and my computer is just hands down better computer, it doesn't break, you can drop it, it has great connections and great speed, and you can game and you can do everything you want on it, and I charge more than my competitors, that's what people expect. They say, oh, well, of course he's charging more. It's a better computer, it is higher quality. And I'm sure there's lots of other quality measures that you can think of that would go into or lots of other products where you would expect to be charged more because of higher quality, and that's something that you are after. Right? Now, on the cost structure side, again, an example is maybe finding cheaper inputs, but it also could just be something like developing an innovative business method, right? And we'll talk about a couple different ways. This isn't always clear what developing an innovative business method really means. But essentially, we're just maybe finding a better way to deliver our product. Maybe we're finding a better way to manufacture our product. Maybe we are finding cheaper inputs, or maybe we're taking advantage of some natural opportunities, and I'll give you some examples of these, that make it cheaper for us to produce our product than our competitors. Right? So a better cost structure can have the same impact as a price premium. Right? And then finally, we can make some more efficient use of our capital. And broadly speaking, the easiest way to think about this is, like I already mentioned, in terms of scalability. If I can somehow add additional customers or add additional capacity without changing the cost of my inputs or the quality of my product, then I will have made I will successfully use my capital more efficiently. And of course, that's going to generate more return for me. So we're going to walk through all three of these strategies. I'll give you 5 or 6 examples of each one in terms of how do you practically do this. We'll talk about how sustainable they are, because that's how we're going to rank which of these strategies are the best. And then at the end of the lecture, we'll talk about the empirical results. We'll look at the last 50 years of data and say, here's what we think should have happened. Here's how it actually turned out in practice. Companies that implemented strategy X had success. Companies that implemented strategy Y didn't have success.